On a freezing night in Wintercrest, Montana, a frail, wild wolf appeared at old Bill Thornton's cabin door, a blood-soaked shoe dangling from its jaw. Its eyes pleaded urgently beneath the swirling snowstorm, silently begging Bill to follow into the darkness. What awaited in the frozen forest would reveal not just the chilling truth behind recent disappearances, but a story of loyalty so powerful it blurred the line between beast and hero, and proved that sometimes redemption comes on four paws. Wintercrest was never kind in the winter months. It was a sleepy, rugged little town nestled deep in Montana, where snow was not a seasonal visitor, but a relentless conqueror that smothered everything in endless sheets of white. Tonight, however, was different, more violent, more ruthless. The wind shrieked relentlessly through skeletal trees, rattling windows, and howling as though carrying a warning. Snow fell mercilessly, burying roads and isolating homes beneath heavy, suffocating blankets of white. William Bill Thornton sat in his worn armchair by the fire, hands roughened by decades of labor, clutching a chipped ceramic mug of coffee long since gone cold. At 68, Bill was tall yet slightly stooped, his once powerful frame softened by age, shoulders broad but weary. His hair, white as fresh snow, was thin and combed carefully back, emphasizing sharp blue eyes deepened by loneliness and loss. Bill's rugged face was lined heavily, each wrinkle telling a silent story of hardship, endurance, and solitude. His thick beard, trimmed neatly, was streaked more silver than white, lending him a dignified air despite his weathered appearance. The heavy flannel shirt and worn denim jeans he wore spoke of practicality, not vanity. Bill had chosen this isolation years ago, after losing his beloved wife Helen to illness. He had withdrawn from the bustling town's center to this modest cabin, near the fringe of Wintercrest's dense, shadowy forest, seeking comfort from memories and solitude. People rarely visited, and Bill preferred it that way. Tonight, however, the cabin seemed unusually lonely, the howling wind outside echoing eerily through the walls, as if carrying whispers from forgotten souls. Bill shook off the strange feeling, attributing it to the ferocity of the storm. Just as he considered rising to rekindle the dwindling flames, a sudden sound jolted him upright. At first, it was faint, barely audible over the wind, but gradually became clearer, desperate scratching at his heavy wooden door. His heart quickened. Bill rarely received visitors even in daylight, let alone during a brutal snowstorm. Setting down the mug, he stood cautiously, bones creaking in protest. He crossed the wooden floor slowly, eyes fixed warily upon the door, where the scratching intensified, growing frantic, urgent. Without thinking, Bill grabbed the old hunting rifle leaning nearby, a relic from younger days, more for reassurance than threat. Grasping the cold iron latch, Bill paused, took a breath, and swung the door open swiftly. Bitter cold air and swirling snow surged into the room, instantly extinguishing the weakening fire behind him. He squinted through the storm, eyes widening in astonishment at the figure before him. Standing in the harsh white glare was not a person, but a wolf, gray-coated, thin, almost skeletal beneath its thick, filthy fur. The creature stood hunched, muscles quivering slightly from exhaustion and pain. Deep amber eyes, fierce yet pleading, locked onto Bill's startled gaze. Despite its pitiful condition, the wolf emanated strength and a peculiar dignity. But what caught Bill's attention immediately was the object clenched carefully in its blood-stained jaws, a woman's shoe, unmistakably soaked in fresh blood. The wolf let out a low, guttural growl, not menacing, but filled with a strange urgency, as though begging for help. Carefully, deliberately, it lowered its head and placed the shoe at Bill's feet, eyes never leaving his face. Bill stared at the bloody sneaker, white leather stained dark crimson. Frayed pink laces dangled loosely, caked with ice and snow. A shiver unrelated to the cold ran down his spine. For several tense seconds, Bill stood immobilized, rifle forgotten in his grip. He studied the wolf again, confusion mixing with dread. Could it truly be asking for help? Bill had spent his life around animals, yet never encountered something as uncanny and purposeful as this. As if sensing his hesitation, the wolf nudged the shoe closer, eyes pleading, ears flattened submissively. Bill exhaled sharply, decision made instinctively. "All right, I understand," he muttered softly, lowering the rifle carefully. He turned inside, grabbing his heavy winter coat, worn leather, lined thickly with wool, slipping it quickly over his broad shoulders. He snatched a lantern from the cluttered table by the door, lighting it swiftly. The amber glow cast strange shadows as it flickered, mingling eerily with the swirling snow. The wolf watched every movement, patient yet anxious. Bill pulled the heavy door shut behind him, sealing warmth and safety inside, facing the brutal night. Snow crunched beneath his heavy boots as he stepped outside, lantern raised high. "Lead on, then," he whispered, breath turning instantly to frost. Without hesitation, the wolf turned, setting a rapid pace toward the dark forest that loomed menacingly ahead. Bill followed closely, lantern bobbing erratically, casting an uncertain light upon the endless white landscape. The snow swallowed the sounds of their movement, the wind's shrieks masking all else. Soon, Bill lost sight of the cabin completely. It was as though the world had narrowed down to him, the wolf, and a bloodied shoe, a mystery that pulled him deeper into unknown danger. The trees soon enveloped them, skeletal branches clawing desperately at the sky. Bill glanced at the wolf frequently, admiring its quiet determination despite the clear signs of fatigue. Suddenly, his mind flashed back to a memory from years earlier. Helen's gentle voice praising the loyalty of wolves, misunderstood creatures with hearts as deep as humans. The memory brought both warmth and pain, spurring him forward despite aching joints. The wolf paused occasionally, sniffing the air, then pressing onward resolutely. Bill's breathing grew heavy as the terrain turned rougher, roots and hidden stones threatening each step. Anxiety tightened his chest, doubt creeping into his mind. Had he been foolish to trust this animal? But each time uncertainty surfaced, he remembered the desperate intensity in the wolf's eyes and the blood-soaked shoe, pushing fear aside. After what felt like hours, but was merely half that, the wolf suddenly halted, ears sharply pricked forward, body tense. Bill froze, scanning the dark woods around him. The lantern's dim glow barely penetrated the dense snow. He held his breath, listening intently. Silence. Yet, something felt unmistakably wrong. "What is it?" he whispered, as though expecting the wolf to respond. The animal lowered itself cautiously, moving silently towards a shadowy shape Bill hadn't noticed earlier, partially obscured by a snow-laden bush. He moved closer, heart hammering against his ribs, dread settling in his stomach like ice. The lantern's wavering glow revealed a human form, a woman, lying motionless, partially hidden beneath frost-covered branches. Her breathing shallow, barely audible, her skin pale as snow itself. Bill knelt urgently beside her, gently brushing snow away from her face, revealing cuts and bruises, her forehead smeared with drying blood. She was young, probably in her late 20s, long auburn hair now frozen into tangled strands across her bruised cheeks. Bill glanced at the wolf, astonishment and gratitude flooding through him. "You did good," he murmured shakily. The wolf's tail wagged weakly once, amber eyes shining briefly with relief before exhaustion overtook it, causing it to collapse quietly into the snow, panting heavily. Resolutely, Bill removed his coat and wrapped the injured woman carefully, then lifted her fragile form gently into his arms. Adrenaline lent him strength beyond his years, urgency replacing weariness. Turning toward the barely visible path back to his cabin, Bill whistled softly, encouraging the wolf. "Come on," he urged gently, hoping the animal understood. Slowly, painfully, The wolf rose, shaking snow from its fur. Limping now, it followed Bill as he trudged back through the stormy woods, carrying their precious cargo. Snow continued to fall relentlessly, the storm raging still, but hope now illuminated their path. Lauren Mitchell hurried along Wintercrest's main street, boots crunching steadily over ice-crusted sidewalks. The storm had briefly relented, leaving behind pristine snow glistening under pale morning sunlight, but the bitter cold remained harsh and unyielding. At 26, Lauren possessed an effortless energy and determination evident in every brisk step she took. Slightly taller than average, slender yet athletic, her appearance was neatly professional, her dark blonde hair tied back securely in a simple ponytail beneath a dark green knit hat. Her hazel eyes, alert and perceptive, scanned the quiet streets thoughtfully as she mentally reviewed her notes on the Foster case. Lauren had been raised locally, leaving only briefly for journalism school before returning home. Driven by a relentless desire for truth, she was known around Wintercrest as curious, persistent, and compassionate. Lauren cared deeply about her community, particularly its vulnerable members, and her determination had become legendary around the small-town newspaper office. The disappearance of Julia Foster and her 9-year-old daughter, Emily, had gripped her thoughts. Julia was a young mother, soft-spoken and gentle, known around town for her kindness and generosity. Emily, a spirited girl with curly brown hair and bright eyes, was frequently seen riding her bike near their modest home, always quick with a wave and cheerful greeting. The trail of clues Lauren had pieced together, thus far pointed directly toward Blue Pine Lodge, a secluded establishment situated near the dense forest that surrounded Wintercrest. It was owned and operated by Eli Hartfield, a mysterious figure whose demeanor had always seemed suspiciously composed to Lauren. Eli was a lean man in his mid-40s, tall and wiry, with dark hair streaked prematurely gray, slicked neatly back. His pale blue eyes often held an unsettling calm, betraying little emotion even during difficult questioning. The locals knew him as reclusive yet polite, though Lauren had sensed a guarded hostility beneath his polite exterior when she'd interviewed him earlier. Lauren entered the lodge's lobby, a cozy yet slightly dated room with worn wooden floors and heavy leather furniture. The air held a lingering scent of pine cleaner and wood smoke, tinged with something else, something old, almost metallic. Eli emerged swiftly from behind the reception desk, his expression carefully neutral. "Ms. Mitchell, back again so soon?" he asked smoothly, attempting a casual tone. Lauren studied him closely, noticing his faint irritation beneath the forced cordiality. "Mr. Hartfield," Lauren began calmly, pulling out her notepad, "I'm hoping to clarify a few details regarding Julia Foster's last known whereabouts. Her car was found abandoned about a half-mile from here, near the trailhead leading into Wintercrest Woods." Eli's face tightened almost imperceptibly, a brief shadow passing behind his eyes. He quickly recovered, folding his long fingers neatly on the counter. "I understand you're concerned," Eli replied evenly, "but I've already told Sheriff Carter everything I know. Mrs. Foster checked in briefly last Tuesday evening, paid cash, and departed early the following morning. That's all there is." Lauren smiled politely, sensing the evasion clearly. "Did she mention any particular plans? Or did you notice anything unusual about her behavior?" Eli shook his head slowly, eyes hardening slightly. "Nothing unusual, I'm afraid. Like I said, she barely spoke. Quiet type, kept to herself." Lauren made a brief note, then looked up sharply, catching Eli's gaze. "And the little girl, Emily, did you see her with her mother?" Eli hesitated just slightly, eyes flickering downward before returning her stare directly. "I never saw the girl." Lauren raised an eyebrow slightly. Eli was lying. She knew it instinctively, though she kept her composure carefully neutral. "I see," she said quietly, closing her notepad slowly. "If you remember anything else, please contact me." Eli nodded stiffly. Lauren turned to leave but paused briefly, eyes sweeping subtly across the lobby. Behind a reception desk was a small storage room, door left slightly ajar. She caught sight of a pair of muddy boots and a rain jacket, child-sized, bright purple, hanging awkwardly from hook. Her pulse quickened, though she maintained her calm. "Thank you again," she said smoothly, stepping quickly back into the frigid air. Outside, Lauren released a deep breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Eli was hiding something. The child's belongings were unmistakably Emily's. Lauren had seen the same bright jacket and boots in photos circulated by local authorities. She pulled out her phone, swiftly dialing the Wintercrest Sheriff's Office. Sheriff John Carter answered, voice gravelly but kind, characteristic of the veteran lawman respected deeply by residents. "Sheriff Carter," Lauren began urgently, "I've got something at Blue Pine Lodge. Emily Foster's jacket. It's hidden behind the desk. I think Eli Hartfield might be involved." Sheriff Carter paused, thoughtful yet clearly concerned. "All right, Lauren, stay calm. I'll send Deputy Barnes immediately. Just wait for backup." Deputy Hank Barnes arrived shortly after. A young, sturdy man in his early 30s, Hank was well-liked for his steady temperament and genuine kindness. He met Lauren outside the lodge, his breath misting visibly in the cold morning air. "Lauren," Hank greeted gently, placing a reassuring hand briefly on her shoulder. "Sheriff said you found something important?" She nodded quickly, motioning toward the lodge's front door. "Emily's jacket and boots. I saw them in the storage room behind the reception." Hank drew a deep breath, steadying himself visibly. He had 2 children at home, making cases involving young victims especially hard on him emotionally. Lauren noticed the tense line of his jaw, appreciating his calm demeanor despite his obvious internal struggle. Together, they re-entered the lodge, Eli watching them suspiciously. Hank approached confidently, badge prominently displayed. "Mr. Hartfield, we have reason to believe you're withholding information in an active missing persons case." Eli's expression flickered briefly before settling into careful neutrality. "I'm not sure what you're implying, Deputy." Without waiting for permission, Hank moved swiftly toward the storage room, opening the door fully. Lauren watched Eli's expression closely, his calm facade crumbling rapidly into panic as the small jacket and boots were revealed clearly. "You mind explaining these?" Hank asked sharply, lifting the jacket carefully. Eli's face flushed angrily, hands shaking slightly. "They were left behind. I didn't do anything wrong." "Then why hide them?" Hank pressed, eyes narrowing suspiciously. Eli fell silent, jaw tightening stubbornly, refusing further comment. Hank shook his head, pulling out his radio. "Sheriff, I've got Eli Hartfield detained for questioning. Evidence secured on premises." Lauren stepped closer, heart hammering fiercely. "Where are they, Eli?" she demanded urgently. "Julia and Emily. They're out there, aren't they?" Eli glanced at Lauren, expression conflicted yet resigned. "They're beyond your help now," he muttered bitterly, eyes shifting toward the woods visible through the window. Lauren's stomach twisted painfully, fearing the worst, yet hoping desperately Eli was wrong. She glanced toward Wintercrest's vast forest, wondering what secrets remained hidden beneath the heavy snow. Sheriff Carter arrived swiftly, grim-faced, taking Eli into custody as Lauren lingered outside, heart heavy with worry and frustration. She stared into the woods, knowing the answers lay buried somewhere within that dense, frozen wilderness. Lauren didn't realize yet how deeply intertwined the fates of Julia, Emily, Eli, and even herself were. But one thing was clear. The truth hidden beneath Wintercrest's snowy depths was darker and more haunting than she had ever imagined. Báo cáo, không có chi tiết nào bị trùng. Chapter này phát triển tuyến phụ tập trung vào Lothe Mitchell và Eli Hartfield, làm nổi bật bí mật che giấu tại Blue Pine và mở rộng điều tra. Bill trudged heavily through the relentless snowfall, his breathing ragged, each footstep sinking deep into the thick, unforgiving snow. The battered lantern swung gently in his hand, casting uneven shadows that danced across the twisted, frozen branches around him. The woman in his arms, fragile yet resilient, stirred occasionally but remained unconscious, her shallow, breathing visible in the bitter air. Bill stole cautious glances downward, examining her pale, bruised face, contorted by pain even in rest. Guilt twisted in his chest, mingling with fear and urgency, propelling him forward through the endless night. Ahead, the gray wolf limped slowly but determinedly, its once sleek fur now heavily crusted with ice, amber eyes sharp and watchful. Bill had started calling it Shadow, a name born from the animal's ghostly appearance and quiet strength. Shadow occasionally glanced back, checking Bill's progress, emitting low, encouraging growls that urged Bill onward despite aching muscles and exhaustion. Suddenly, the wolf paused, its thin body rigidly alert, ears sharply pricked forward. Bill halted, heartbeat quickening in alarm. Ahead, concealed by tangled branches and draped heavily with snow, stood a small, dilapidated wooden cabin. The structure was barely visible in the swirling darkness, its windows shattered long ago, the roof sagging beneath accumulated snowfall. It exuded an air of abandonment, yet Shadow approached it purposefully, nose twitching with quiet intent. Bill hesitated only briefly before following, trusting instinctively in the creature that had guided him thus far. He carefully laid the injured woman against a sheltered wall, brushing snow gently from her pale cheeks. Carefully, he checked her pulse again, relieved at the steady, albeit weak, heartbeat beneath his fingertips. As he cautiously entered the cabin, the rottenwood groaned beneath his feet, the cold air thick with mustiness and decay. Inside, discarded furniture littered the room, chairs overturned, a rusted stove standing silent and useless in the corner. Movement from the shadows startled him. Bill swiftly raised the lantern, heart racing, illuminating a battered, frightened figure sitting slumped against the far wall. Julia Foster, the missing mother from town. Julia's long auburn hair, tangled and filthy, partially obscured her bruised face, her dark eyes wide with fear and surprise. She appeared in her early 30s, slender yet strong, though now her frame was weak and trembling from cold and injury. She wore a torn, dirty sweater, her hands tightly bound with fraying rope. Recognizing her instantly from recent news reports, Bill approached slowly, voice gentle. "It's all right now," he assured softly. "I'm Bill Thornton. I'm going to get you out of here." Julia stared in disbelief, tears filling her exhausted eyes. "My daughter, Emily," she whispered weakly, her voice hoarse and cracked. "Please, she's still out there somewhere." Bill knelt beside her quickly, cutting through the ropes binding her wrists with his small hunting knife, carefully freeing her. Julia winced slightly, flexing her bruised wrists slowly, eyes filled with quiet gratitude. "Who did this to you?" Bill asked urgently, glancing around warily. "A man from the lodge," Julia murmured, shivering violently, voice barely audible. "He brought us here, said he'd help, but Emily got away, ran into the woods." Bill nodded solemnly, anger simmering deep inside. Gently, he guided Julia outside, supporting her carefully toward where the other injured woman rested. Shadow watched closely, calm yet alert. Bill introduced Julia briefly, and despite her own pain, Julia instantly moved closer, wrapping the stranger protectively with Bill's coat, their mutual suffering creating an immediate bond of understanding. "I'll go find Emily," Bill promised gravely, rising with determination. Shadow immediately moved closer, standing attentively beside him. Julia hesitated briefly, eyes haunted yet hopeful. "Please find my little girl," she pleaded quietly. Meanwhile, in Wintercrest, Lauren Mitchell paced anxiously inside her small office, a cramped yet organized room filled with stacks of newspapers, files, and hastily scrawled notes pinned to walls. She examined the gathered evidence once more, her thoughts racing as she pieced together Eli Hartfield's troubling past. Through diligent research, Lauren uncovered a cold case from 8 years prior. A woman named Hannah Hartfield, Eli's former wife, who had mysteriously disappeared under circumstances eerily similar to the Foster case. Her disappearance had remained unsolved, eventually fading into the quiet whispers of Wintercrest's dark history. Lauren's fingers moved rapidly over her keyboard, pulling up old articles and reports, eyes scanning quickly yet carefully. She uncovered a grainy photo from the original investigation. Hannah Hartfield, a cheerful woman with soft features, curly chestnut hair, and an easy, kind smile. Beside her, Eli stood rigidly, a faint smirk on his lips, eyes cold, distant, unreadable. Sheriff Carter appeared at Lauren's door, interrupting her intense concentration. The older man entered slowly, his expression solemn beneath his weathered face, lined deeply by worry and responsibility. Sheriff Carter, robustly built with short salt-and-pepper hair and intense green eyes, was a man known for integrity and unyielding persistence. "I thought you'd want to know," he began carefully, Eli's refusing to talk, but we found evidence linking him directly to Hannah's disappearance. Personal belongings, items buried beneath the lodge's floorboards. Lauren exhaled sharply, leaning back heavily in her chair. "So, it's him," she murmured quietly, frustration evident. "But what about Julia and Emily? He hasn't admitted anything." Sheriff Carter shook his head slowly, eyes weary but determined. "No, but we're organizing a search team immediately. Deputy Barnes will lead it. Bill Thornton lives near the woods. I'll contact him, see if he's noticed anything unusual." Lauren nodded thoughtfully, mind already racing ahead. She stood decisively, grabbing her coat swiftly from the chair back. "I'll go with you, Sheriff. If there's a chance they're still alive, I want to be there." Back in the forest, Bill followed Shadow carefully through the worsening storm, lanterns swinging precariously, casting uncertain pools of light on a snow-covered ground. Every rustle, every snapping branch heightened his anxiety, his senses sharpened painfully by the gravity of their mission. Shadow moved swiftly yet cautiously, periodically pausing to sniff the air, amber eyes narrowed sharply, alert to every subtle clue the forest offered. As they moved deeper, the storm intensified once more, fierce winds tearing at Bill's exposed face, snowflakes stinging mercilessly. Determinedly, Bill pressed onward, relying entirely on Shadow's instincts, hope and dread mingling within him. Suddenly, Shadow halted sharply, ears pinned back, body lowered into a defensive crouch. Bill froze immediately, heart pounding in his chest. Through swirling snow and shadows ahead, he saw the faint outline of a small figure partially concealed beneath a dense thicket. Carefully, Bill approached, breath held anxiously. As he moved closer, the figure stirred weakly, revealing a pale, frightened face beneath tangled curls. Emily Foster, shivering violently, eyes wide with terror yet relief at his approach. Bill knelt swiftly, wrapping Emily securely in his arms, her fragile body trembling against him. Shadow pressed closely beside them, watchful and protective. "It's okay now," Bill whispered reassuringly, emotion thickening his voice. "You're safe, Emily. Your mother's waiting." Emily's eyes filled instantly with tears, relief mingling with exhaustion. "Mommy's alive?" she whispered softly, voice breaking slightly. "Yes," Bill assured gently. "We're going home now." As they began the arduous journey back, Bill glanced gratefully at Shadow, the wolf's fierce loyalty humbling him deeply. In that moment, he understood profoundly. The wolf was no mere animal, but a guardian whose courage and devotion had led them safely through darkness, guiding them homeward once again. The blizzard returned with a renewed ferocity, snow whipping violently through the frozen air, blinding Bill Thornton as he stumbled deeper into the heart of the dark, dense forest. Shadow, the gray wolf, limped steadily ahead, unwavering despite exhaustion and injuries. Bill clutched Emily Foster tightly in his arms, her tiny frame shivering uncontrollably beneath his heavy coat. The little girl, her curly brown hair wet and tangled from snow, eyes wide with lingering fear, clung desperately to his shoulder. Bill murmured soft assurances he wasn't entirely certain he could fulfill. But he knew turning back wasn't an option. Not yet. Not until they were truly safe. The forest grew denser, the trees thick and menacing, branches heavy with ice, snapping under the weight of snow. Just as Bill began to question the wolf's guidance, Shadow suddenly halted, ears pinned back, body tense and alert. Bill froze, straining his eyes through the swirling snow. Ahead lay a deep ravine, a sheer drop plunging into darkness. At the edge, partially obscured by tangled shrubs, stood a figure hunched over, desperately tossing items over the cliff. Bill's heart seized with recognition. Eli Hartfield. Even from a distance, Bill recognized Eli's wiry frame. Now frantic, movements agitated and desperate. The innkeeper wore a thick, worn coat, his dark hair disheveled, eyes wild with panic. Seeing him now, stripped of his calm facade, confirmed Bill's deepest suspicions. Eli froze suddenly, turning sharply as Shadow emitted a low growl, audible despite the raging storm. Eli's face twisted in fury and shock at Bill's appearance. "Stay back, old man," he shouted harshly, clutching a small metal box tightly. "This isn't your concern." Bill steadied his breathing, setting Emily gently behind a thick trunk for safety, shielding her from sight. His weathered voice carried determinately through the howling wind. "You hurt innocent people, Eli. This ends now." Eli's eyes narrowed dangerously, his hand slipping into his pocket to produce a small, gleaming knife. Bill stepped cautiously forward, his movements deliberate. Shadow remained beside him, hackles raised, ready to defend. Suddenly, from the darkness behind, another figure emerged. Lauren Mitchell, her face pale but resolute, bundled in her dark coat, her blonde hair wet and windblown beneath a knit hat. Lauren had followed Bill's tracks through the woods, driven by determination and instinct after discovering Eli had fled custody from Sheriff Carter's station. Her sudden arrival startled Eli momentarily, his attention now divided between two adversaries. Lauren's voice cut sharply through the storm. "Eli, we know everything about Hannah, Julia, Emily. It's over. The sheriff and his men are on their way." Eli's lip curled angrily, desperation overtaking reason. "You don't know anything," he snarled bitterly, voice breaking slightly. "Hannah betrayed me, tried to leave. She deserved her fate. Julia knew too much. I did what I had to." Lauren edged slowly closer, eyes locked on Eli. "It's not too late. Tell us the truth, and maybe there's still redemption for you." Eli laughed bitterly, eyes wild and lost. "Redemption? It's far too late for that." Without warning, he lunged at Lauren, knife raised. Shadow reacted instantly, leaping fiercely, jaws snapping. Eli stumbled back, knife clattering onto ice-covered stones. Bill lunged, tackling Eli forcefully to the ground, struggling fiercely amid snow and mud. Eli, younger and frantic, fought violently, desperation lending strength. But Bill, driven by fierce determination, managed to pin him briefly. "Go!" Eli shouted in panicked fury, wrenching free momentarily, scrambling upright. Eyes wild, he glanced toward the ravine, realizing escape was his only option. Without another thought, he bolted wildly into the dense trees, disappearing quickly into darkness. Bill staggered upright, breathing heavily, ribs aching sharply from the struggle. Lauren quickly retrieved the fallen knife, trembling slightly, yet composed. "We have to get out of here quickly," she urged softly. Bill nodded swiftly, returning immediately to Emily. The child stood frozen, eyes wide in shock, yet remarkably brave despite everything. Bill lifted her carefully, heart swelling with quiet pride at her resilience. Shadow stepped close, licking Emily's hand gently, comforting the child with silent reassurance. Lauren observed quietly, deeply moved by the wolf's gentle instinct despite its fierce appearance. The group began the arduous trek back toward the abandoned cabin, every step exhausting, limbs aching bitterly from cold and fatigue. After what felt like eternity, The faint silhouette of the small wooden cabin appeared through swirling snow. Relief flooded Bill as Julia Foster, though weak and pale, emerged shakily from inside, eyes widening joyously as she recognized Emily held securely in Bill's strong arms. "Mommy!" Emily cried tearfully, reaching eagerly. Bill gently placed Emily down, watching with profound relief and warmth as mother and daughter reunited tearfully, embracing tightly beneath the battered shelter of the old cabin porch. Lauren stood silently beside Bill, her expression softening. For a brief moment, amidst darkness and storm, they witnessed a beautiful, powerful reunion that spoke profoundly to human resilience and love. Shadow lay quietly nearby, exhausted yet content, watching the reunion calmly, amber eyes gentle and knowing. Bill approached slowly, kneeling beside the wolf, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you, my friend," he murmured sincerely. Shadow's tail thumped softly, a simple gesture filled with profound understanding and acceptance. Sheriff Carter and Deputy Hank Barnes soon arrived, following Lauren's instructions and Bill's careful trail markings through the forest. Sheriff Carter, sturdy and commanding even amidst chaos, immediately coordinated medical attention for Julia, Emily, and the rescued woman, Sarah Jennings, a hiker reported missing days earlier. Sarah, in her late 20s, was petite with dark hair and gentle eyes, bruised but deeply grateful, thanking Bill and Lauren tearfully. Sheriff Carter spoke briefly with Bill, deeply appreciative of his courage and assistance. "We'll search thoroughly for Eli. He won't escape justice," he assured firmly. Lauren approached Bill quietly as medical personnel prepared the survivors for transport back to Wintercrest, her expression solemn yet filled with quiet admiration. "You were brave out there, Bill," she said sincerely. "Thank you for everything." Bill offered a small, humble smile, eyes weary yet grateful. "I couldn't have done it alone," he replied softly, glancing warmly toward Shadow, who now rested calmly nearby. "He deserves most of the credit." Lauren nodded thoughtfully, observing Shadow carefully. "He's remarkable," she agreed quietly. "A guardian in disguise." As they finally departed the dark, forbidding woods toward the waiting town lights, warmth and safety gradually enveloping them, Bill reflected silently upon everything that had unfolded. Dark secrets revealed, bonds formed through adversity, the silent bravery of both animal and human spirits shining brightly through the darkness. For Wintercrest, this night would mark both tragedy and triumph, loss and reunion. But most importantly, it was a testament to resilience and hope, illuminated brightly by courage, compassion, and unwavering determination that had brought them safely through darkness into the promise of a new dawn. Morning broke pale and quiet over Wintercrest, sunlight filtering weakly through heavy clouds that promised yet another snowfall. Lauren Mitchell sat at her cluttered desk in the newsroom, a steaming mug of black coffee untouched beside her as she sifted meticulously through stacks of faded newspapers, photos, and old investigative files spread across her desk. Each piece of evidence pulled her deeper into the chilling narrative woven around Eli Hartfield, now the town's most wanted man. Lauren's hazel eyes narrowed thoughtfully as she examined a faded photograph. A happier Eli standing beside a woman Lauren recognized instantly as Hannah Hartfield, his missing wife from 8 years earlier. Hannah had soft chestnut curls cascading to her shoulders, gentle eyes, and a warm, radiant smile that spoke of genuine kindness. The tragic irony wasn't lost on Lauren. Hannah seemed the very antithesis of her husband's hidden darkness. A quiet knock at the door drew Lauren's attention away momentarily. Deputy Hank Barnes stood at the entrance, his face tired yet earnest. Hank was young, early 30s, strong-built, with short brown hair and sincere brown eyes always reflecting compassion. A devoted father himself, he had been deeply affected by recent events involving Julia and Emily. His usually warm demeanor had grown slightly tense, his posture straighter, determined to see justice served. "Lauren," Hank said softly, stepping cautiously inside. Sheriff Carter thought you should know. Julia and Emily are stable. They'll recover physically. Emotionally, it'll take time. Lauren exhaled in relief, gratitude evident in her weary expression. Thanks, Hank. At least that's some good news. Hank approached slowly, glancing curiously at the scattered documents. What are you on to now? Lauren sighed deeply, handing him the photograph. Eli Hartfield's wife, Hannah, disappeared 8 years ago, presumed a runaway, but now. I think we both know better. Hank studied the photo grimly, jaw tightening with quiet anger. Eli's left too much pain behind. Sheriff Carter has men combing the woods. He won't get far. Lauren nodded slowly, determination hardening in her expression. I need to dig deeper, Hank. Something about Blue Pine Lodge still bothers me. Maybe there's something we missed. I'll come with you, Hank offered immediately. The place is sealed, but no one will object. Arriving at the lodge, they found Bill Thornton already standing near the edge of the property, Shadow seated quietly at his side. Bill looked exhausted yet resolute, thick coat tightly wrapped around his strong frame, eyes sharp beneath the brim of his old woolen cap. He offered Lauren and Hank a cautious nod. Thought we'd help search, Bill said quietly, motioning toward the wolf. Shadow's restless. Seems there's something here he still needs to show us. Shadow stood calmly, gray fur cleaner now, though scars from his harsh wilderness life were evident beneath his thick coat. Intelligent amber eyes moved alertly, nose twitching as if catching a scent only he remembered. Lauren observed the wolf curiously, realization dawning upon her suddenly. Shadow, she repeated softly, eyes widening. Hannah had a dog named Shadow. A wolf hybrid. It's here, in her records. He disappeared when she did. Bill glanced sharply toward Lauren, surprise and understanding mingling in his expression. That explains everything, he murmured thoughtfully. Shadow looked up at them knowingly, then moved deliberately toward the lodge, pausing briefly to glance back, clearly waiting for them to follow. They entered carefully, the lodge eerily silent, air heavy with stale memories. Shadow moved decisively, heading directly to the storage room hidden behind the reception desk, paused scratching purposefully at a seemingly insignificant area of floorboards. Hank knelt swiftly, tapping carefully, listening for hollowness. Here, he murmured grimly, pulling loose boards aside with effort. Beneath, a narrow staircase led into darkness, a secret cellar hidden expertly beneath the lodge. Lauren felt her pulse quicken as they cautiously descended. The cellar below was small, cold, and disturbingly tidy. Metal shelving lining the walls, boxes labeled neatly, giving the appearance of normalcy until examined closely. Carefully, Hank opened a box marked Personal Effects, discovering faded clothing and jewelry unmistakably belonging to Hannah. Lauren carefully lifted a delicate necklace engraved H&H, Hannah, and Hartfield, her stomach churning with quiet horror. Bill stood protectively nearby, Shadow, sniffing urgently at a second set of shelves, scratching insistently at the bottom. Bill moved swiftly, revealing yet another hidden compartment behind stacked boxes, several journals carefully hidden. Lauren retrieved one, opening it cautiously, her breath catching sharply. Inside were handwritten notes, meticulously recording dates, descriptions of victims, even detailed instructions on disposing evidence. Eli's handwriting, meticulous yet devoid of humanity, chronicled at least 4 missing women besides Hannah, all previously unsolved disappearances. Lauren's hands shook slightly as she turned pages, each revelation deepening her revulsion. "This is his confession," she whispered, eyes stinging with emotion. "He's documented everything." Hank steadied her gently, his expression resolute yet deeply troubled. "This ends here. Eli won't escape." They gathered evidence carefully, aware this discovery would finally ensure justice for those lost. As they emerged into daylight, Sheriff Carter arrived, expression tense yet hopeful. Lauren quickly briefed him, handing over crucial evidence. Sheriff Carter's green eyes burned fiercely, anger mingled with sadness for the victims, including Hannah. "We'll find him," he vowed grimly. Justice won't fail this time. Shadow lingered nearby, quiet and reflective, his eyes lingering upon the lodge sadly. Lauren approached gently, kneeling beside him, offering a comforting touch he accepted silently. "You remembered her, didn't you?" Lauren whispered softly. Shadow leaned gently against her hand, eyes closing briefly. Lauren understood profoundly. Shadow's loyalty had transcended death itself, guiding him through years alone, waiting patiently until the truth was finally uncovered. Bill stepped close, voice gentle. He never forgot. His loyalty kept him alive all these years, waiting for someone to listen. Lauren nodded, eyes misted with tears of respect and compassion for the wolf. He's earned peace now. He doesn't have to be alone anymore. Back in town, news of Eli's horrifying past spread quickly, Wintercrest residents grappling quietly with the shocking revelations. Lauren sat silently at her desk late that night, exhaustion heavy upon her, yet heartened by the knowledge justice was finally within reach. Hannah's story would be told truthfully at last, her tragic fate no longer buried beneath Eli's lies. Lauren sighed deeply, looking thoughtfully toward the moonlit window. She knew darkness still lingered beyond town borders, Eli still hiding within familiar wilderness. But tonight, beneath the quiet stars illuminating Wintercrest, Lauren felt certain the darkness was receding. Justice and truth would eventually prevail, guided by bravery, loyalty, and unwavering determination. In the days that followed, Wintercrest rallied courageously, supporting survivors like Julia and Emily, determined to heal wounds and reclaim safety. Shadow, now firmly recognized as Hannah's devoted protector, became a symbol of resilience and hope, warmly welcomed alongside Bill within the community he'd silently guarded for years. Eli remained hidden briefly, but Wintercrest would never again ignore the shadows he'd once exploited. His past was finally exposed, victims honored, truths revealed. Lauren, Bill, and Shadow had illuminated darkness bravely, guiding their community homeward at last. The snow had begun to melt as the first breath of spring gently swept over Wintercrest, thawing the frozen landscape and revealing traces of life hidden beneath winter's long embrace. In the heart of the quiet town square, residents moved with renewed energy, grateful for the warmth that signaled hope and fresh beginnings. Among those who emerged stronger after the harsh winter was Julia Foster, now visibly recovered and vibrant again. Her auburn hair gleamed softly beneath the sunlight, and the dark bruises that once marred her gentle features had faded into memory. Standing beside her, clutching her hand tightly, was Emily, her daughter, whose bright eyes sparkled once again with childhood joy. Their ordeal had left deep emotional scars, yet the strength Julia found in motherhood had pulled them both back from darkness. Sheriff John Carter had personally overseen their protection, a steady and reassuring presence throughout their recovery. Known around Wintercrest for his robust build, gray-flecked dark hair, and compassionate green eyes, Sheriff Carter had earned the respect and admiration of the townspeople through his quiet yet unwavering dedication. Today, his gaze was soft with satisfaction and relief, a rare, gentle smile visible beneath his neatly trimmed mustache. The dark days were finally behind them. Eli Hartfield, now securely behind bars, facing a justice that was long overdue. Eli had been captured attempting to escape the dense wilderness outside town, weakened by exposure and exhausted by the relentless pursuit of Carter's deputies. It had been Hank Barnes who apprehended Eli, the young deputy confronting the killer with quiet determination and courage. Hank's modesty forbade him from acknowledging the bravery he'd shown, yet townspeople knew differently, their gratitude quietly evident through kind gestures and appreciative nods. Lauren Mitchell watched the bustling activity from the front porch of the Wintercrest Gazette's modest building, sipping her steaming coffee thoughtfully. Her detailed exposé on Eli's crimes and the heroism that led to his capture had garnered statewide attention. Lauren's reputation as a dedicated, fearless reporter grew overnight, yet she remained humble, deeply committed to telling truthful stories that brought justice and closure. Standing beside her was Sarah Jennings, the young hiker whose own nightmare had ended due to Lauren and Bill's courage. Sarah, petite and gentle with dark, thoughtful eyes and short dark hair, had become Lauren's close friend, bound by shared trauma, yet hopeful for brighter days ahead. The two young women had forged an unbreakable bond, becoming supportive pillars for each other. Across town, Bill Thornton's modest cabin bustled with unfamiliar warmth. For years, Bill had lived in solitude, haunted by grief and memories of his beloved wife, Helen. Yet today, his home overflowed with visitors eager to celebrate recovery and redemption. Bill, though initially hesitant about the attention, now felt a quiet pride watching his neighbors congregate happily within his once lonely walls. Standing tall and strong despite his age, Bill's rugged face was softened by the genuine warmth and companionship filling his home. His once brooding blue eyes sparkled quietly with newfound contentment. Yet the true heart of the celebration lay quietly beside the fireplace, curled comfortably upon a thick woolen blanket. Shadow, the loyal wolf whose bravery had saved Julia, Emily, and Sarah. The wolf's thick fur had been carefully groomed, scars gently healed under Bill's meticulous care. Shadow had initially been wary, instincts forged from survival. Yet over weeks of gentle patience from Bill, his caution had gradually softened. Now, Shadow watched the gathering calmly, amber eyes alert yet relaxed, clearly sensing the safe haven Bill's cabin had become. Approaching Shadow cautiously was Emily, guided gently by Julia's reassuring touch. Shadow lifted his head slightly, observing the child quietly, then slowly lowered it, allowing Emily to stroke his thick fur softly. Julia smiled warmly, deeply touched by the gentle interaction between her daughter and the wolf who'd brought her safely home. "You saved us," Emily whispered softly, tears brightening her eyes briefly before she blinked them away bravely. "Thank you, Shadow." Nearby, Lauren quietly observed this heartfelt exchange, profoundly moved. She gently squeezed Sarah's hand, their shared glance conveying silent understanding. Shadow had not merely rescued individuals. He had mended broken hearts and restored lost hope to an entire community. Days passed into weeks, bringing healing, peace, and closure. Shadow remained steadfastly by Bill's side, their bond strengthened profoundly through mutual trust and understanding. Bill had begun quietly teaching townspeople about wildlife conservation, inspired by Shadow's remarkable intelligence and quiet dignity. The once isolated woodsman now became a respected figure, teaching younger generations respect and empathy toward nature, a lesson embodied perfectly in Shadow himself. The town council, inspired by overwhelming community sentiment, announced plans for an official ceremony to honor Shadow and the heroes of Wintercrest. The day of the celebration dawned clear and bright, the town square beautifully decorated. Residents gathered eagerly beneath gentle spring sunshine. At the center stood a modest wooden platform, Sheriff Carter stepping forward solemnly to address the gathered crowd. "Today, we gather not only to celebrate bravery and resilience, but to acknowledge the profound bonds that define and strengthen our community." Carter's deep voice carried warmly through the square. Shadow, our guardian wolf, reminded us of the importance of loyalty, courage, and compassion. The audience applauded warmly, eyes turning respectfully toward Shadow, who stood calmly beside Bill on the platform, gazing attentively out upon the gathered townspeople. Lauren stepped forward carefully, a small plaque in hand engraved simply, "Shadow, Guardian of Wintercrest, symbol of hope and loyalty." She knelt gently beside the wolf, her voice gentle yet steady. "You reminded us what loyalty truly means," Lauren said softly, placing the plaque gently near Shadow. "You've earned your place among us forever." Shadow's eyes softened slightly, as though understanding perfectly. He leaned slightly into Lauren's touch, accepting affection gracefully. The celebration continued joyously, filled with music, laughter, and heartfelt speeches. Julia stood quietly with Emily, both deeply moved, grateful for the community's unwavering support. Sarah laughed freely with new friends, the painful memories behind her gradually fading. As evening fell gently, stars twinkling softly overhead, Bill returned quietly to his cabin, Shadow walking comfortably beside him. Together, they stood silently, watching stars illuminate the vast Montana sky, breathing in peaceful silence. "Feels different now, doesn't it?" Bill murmured softly. "This place, our lives, they're brighter somehow." Shadow looked up quietly, amber eyes shining gently beneath moonlight, understanding clear and silent. "You found your way home," Bill continued softly, voice filled with quiet emotion. "Maybe I did too." The wolf gently leaned against Bill's side, acceptance, gratitude, and trust expressed silently, yet clearly. No further words were needed between them. From that day forward, Wintercrest held a special reverence for Shadow. The wolf had not merely saved lives. He had guided them homeward from darkness, becoming an enduring symbol of courage, loyalty, and hope. Lauren continued writing passionately, telling truthful stories of courage and resilience, inspired profoundly by those she'd encountered. Julia and Emily found healing through family and community, embracing the love surrounding them. Sheriff Carter, Hank Barnes, Sarah Jennings, each carried forward the profound lesson Shadow had quietly imparted. And each evening beneath Montana's starlit sky, Bill Thornton and Shadow stood quietly together, watching peacefully as seasons passed gently, lives continued joyously, and Wintercrest flourished stronger than ever before, forever remembering the remarkable wolf who guided them safely home. The story of Shadow reminds us gently, yet powerfully, that loyalty, courage, and hope can guide us through life's darkest storms. In our daily lives, each of us can become a beacon of strength and compassion, just as Shadow was for Wintercrest. If this story touched your heart, please consider sharing it with others, leaving a thoughtful comment, and subscribing to our channel for more uplifting stories. May God bless each and every one of you who watch this. Comment amen if you believe loyalty and courage can truly lead us home.